Welcome to the New Mexico Philharmonic's Wednesday Night Live, and we have a completely different show for you tonight. My guests are two trombonists. Debra Taylor was for a number of years the principal trombonist of the New Mexico Philharmonic, and Darren Millen, the solo bass trombonist from the São Paulo State Symphony Orchestra here in Brazil. First, we'll hear Debra Taylor performing Telemann's Flute Fantasy in D minor in a transcription for solo trombone. And after that, we'll have Darren Millen performing Chiquinhas Gonzaga's Corta Jaca, which means cut the jackfruit, for solo trombone and piano. We just heard these two incredible videos from my guests for our Wednesday night live tonight. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome to our show, Debra Taylor and Darren Millen. Good evening, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you all doing?
Wonderful.
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Debbie, I have not seen you since our last concert. I remember we played Nielsen Symphony No. 4 together. And I'm trying to remember if you played on my last concert with New World Symphony also, the last time I conducted. So you're already gone by then.
Yes.
And Darren, we performed so many concerts together. Well, you actually played Wagner's The Ring Without Words with us just a year ago, almost to the day. So it's wonderful to see both of you again. And I have to say, I so much enjoy your playing and your artistry. And it's such a great pleasure, so unique for me to receive two trombonists on our show tonight. So thank you for being here with us.
It's a pleasure.
So Debbie, that Telemann originally is for flute solo, and you transcribed it for the trombone. Is this something normal that happens, that you would transcribe different pieces for other instruments for the trombone?
Actually, I was not the transcriber, but I always look for great music. And so I've played music that was originally intended for a lot of different instruments. And this Flute Fantasy is one of my favorites. I've played that for a long time because I love it so much.
I have to say, it sounds beautiful on the trombone. So sorry, the flutists that are listening to us by any chance, but it sounds like it was meant to be.
Thank you.
And Darren, tell us about the piece that we heard by Chiquinha Gonzaga. That's such an unusual and fun work.
Well, I have a duo with a Canadian-Brazilian pianist called Duo das Americas, and I was really fortunate that she has a great knowledge about Brazilian literature. So, and I discovered that Gonzaga was a woman of mixed descent and lived in the late 1800s. And so I thought it was very important that we have a piece by a female composer on our program. And I was really, glad to find this. So.
That was a great choice. For those who don't know, Chiquinha Gonzaga was one of the first woman composers in Brazil to have to become famous, and she wrote, both concert music as well as Brazilian popular music with the choros and sambas. And so she was really one of the most famous musicians of her time. So thank you for choosing that, Darren. That's really wonderful. And Debbie, so you were in the New Mexico Symphony for a number of years, and then it became, of course, the New Mexico Philharmonic. And you just happened to have retired right before I became the music director. But I had the chance to do that one performance, which was so magnificent, of Nielsen's Fourth Symphony. How long did you play in the New Mexico Symphony and New Mexico Philharmonic for?
Altogether, it was 28 years. Yeah.
Oh,
amazing.
Awesome.
And are you originally from New Mexico? Where were you born?
Not at all. I was born in New Jersey and raised in a small town in New York State. Went to school in Boston and then in Philadelphia, the same school that Darren went to, Curtis Institute. And then lived, when I moved to New Mexico, I moved from Chicago. I was living in Chicago and taking auditions. Yeah.
Wonderful. And Darren, what is your hometown? Where were you born?
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland.
Fantastic. And then you just happen to have attended the same school as Debbie, the famous Curtis Institute of Music.
Yes, yes. I was quite overwhelmed by the prospect, and frankly, you know, to this day, I'm still quite overwhelmed in truth by the colleagueship of the people who've gone there. So, in fact, Debbie for me is you know, a hero. Is like someone I looked up to for, you know, for a long time. Still look up to her, and I really, you know, it's an honor to be on this virtual presentation with her. So I wanted to thank you, Roberto, for thinking of me, and it's a pleasure to see and meet you virtually, Debbie. So it's wonderful.
Yes,
I have
likewise.
to say, I have to say, Debbie, when I mentioned to Darren that I was going to New Mexico and becoming the music director, the first name that he mentioned, oh, Debbie Taylor, she is amazing. You're going to love her. So, you know, you already were very well respected by Darren and the world of trombones out there. And so let me just briefly explain to our audience, you know, because usually we get all these Juilliard alumni, right? And for the first time, I have two people that have gone to our competition, the Curtis Institute of Music. And I'm loving this. Actually, the Curtis Institute of Music is one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. It's a rather smaller school. There are only about 150 students, if correct me if I'm wrong. Very different from Juilliard that has over 1,000 students and has also dancers, has a theater department, now has a jazz department. The Curtis Institute is solely dedicated to classical musicians, and they all receive 100% full scholarships to attend the Curtis Institute. It's a free school, which is something unheard of in North America. I know that President Joe Polisi from Juilliard tried to make Juilliard a tuition-free school, but he never accomplished that, unfortunately. So you have to pay a small fortune to attend Juilliard, but all of the Curtis students are given full scholarships, which is amazing. That's also what makes this school so competitive, and because they have some of the best teachers in the country and in the world, for that matter. So I'm very honored and privileged to have both of you. And I understand, Debbie, that you were perhaps the very first woman to graduate from Curtis as a tenor trombonist. Is that correct?
I think I was the second. Mary Beth O'Quinn, I should give her some credit. I was the second woman to graduate. I don't know if she was a tenor or a bass trombonist, though.
Wow. So women have been playing the trombone for a number of years. But certainly when you started, it was still something very relatively new.
Yes.
Amazing. And Darren, you know, still to these days, we find very few African Americans in North American orchestras or in any orchestra in the world. I would say maybe in Brazil, we have more of a mix, but that's also due to the characteristics of Brazilian society that is more mixed. And you have more African Brazilians as musicians, and we also have a lot of incentive as free schools and opportunities. But for you also, it is, I mean, going to Curtis as an African American, were there many African Americans during your time?
Well, thank you for asking. And so I graduated from Curtis in 1990, and the baseline reference for the number of students was usually around 175 students. And Curtis was able to afford to pay full scholarships for its entire student complement because of keeping the numbers low and managing the endowment that they had available. When I arrived at Curtis in 1986, I was the only Black student to be accepted that year. But upon entering to the school, I did encounter one Black horn player who was already there. His name was Derek. And then I think maybe about a year or two later, that was when Andre Raphael Smith entered the school in the conducting program. So, even that we're talking about African Americans, but I remember also the first Latino person that I met, and that was Miguel Hart de Boya, was the conducting student also who entered at that time. But at the time when I entered as a freshman, I was the only person, of color who entered, and it was pretty intimidating because in the entire orchestra, there was just myself and Derek, we're kind of used to this in a way, but I just remember being intimidated by the size of the mansion of what was the former Curtis Institute of Music. Now it's sort of like a corporate kind of, almost like a Ivy League college type of a facility. But back when I went there and when Debbie went there, it was just the mansion, and it's dark and foreboding and very intimidating. So I remember I was the first candidate of 16 bass trombone candidates that year. And I picked the unlucky number 1. I was candidate number 1. And I mean, I basically packed my bags afterwards. I was like, okay, there's no way I'm getting to Curtis. And I left Philadelphia. I didn't even wait around until the end of the audition. I literally, packed my bags and I got on the train and I was back home. I didn't hear anything from Curtis until about a month later when I got the letter in the mail. It wasn't an email, it was a letter still.
Wow.
Well, amazing story. Cheers. This is to you, Darren, and this is to you, Debbie, for getting into Curtis. Now, Debbie, you not only became one of the members of the New Mexico Symphony, you became the principal trombonist. So that's even, more responsibility. Was that your very first job, or did you have other jobs before coming to Albuquerque?
No, I had other jobs before I came to Albuquerque. I had spent a year in the Florida Symphony, which is now no longer. And I had been a member of the Grant Park Symphony for 3 years before I moved to New Mexico, the Grant Park Symphony of Chicago. I'd been there for 3 years. This was my first big principal job. Yeah. So it was a change.
Well, that's a great orchestra that functions during the summer, right? For 2.5 months, Grant
Yes.
Park with all those beautiful open air concerts.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to conduct that a few times. And it's just a wonderful orchestra that has musicians from all over the country.
Yes.
And I see. And finally, you moved to Albuquerque, this most beautiful place. Darren, I say that Albuquerque is one of the best kept secrets in North America because I just love it.
I can imagine. You all look
everybody
happy.
Everybody knows of Santa Fe, but I have to say, Albuquerque is a precious jewel, and I just love it every time I'm there. Was it easy for you to move to Albuquerque, Debbie?
I was thrilled about winning the job. I was so happy that I couldn't believe that I could live in a city and play in a fine orchestra with an amazing brass section and live in the mountains at the same time. I immediately moved to Cedar Crest and then Tijeras. So I was a mountain person for the first 5 years. I was so excited to be able to live in the mountains and play in an orchestra. It was terrific.
Fantastic. Well, we have more video selections from both of our guests tonight. So let's listen to Darren's next video. Darren, tell us, what are you going to play in this next video? Can you tell us a little bit about his repertoire? I don't know if you're performing now the Francisco Braga piece, another Brazilian composer.
Well, I have so I have the other Brazilian repertoire. It's called Toada, and you can correct me if I'm saying that correctly. Toada is by Francisco Braga, who coincidentally was the first Brazilian composer to write for the piano and trombone combination. And I discovered that thanks to Manuel Correa de Lago, a musicologist who was on the board of directors with me with the São Paulo State Symphony Foundation. And that was his present to me when I finished my mandate. And he thought that it was interesting for me to perform basically chamber music by Brazilian composer, because I had said that there was no repertoire that I had discovered, original repertoire for the combination, and he found me a crown jewel. And ever since I've been performing it, it's called A Noite Sendo, by the way. This is the piece that Francisco Braga wrote. But the piece that I'm going to play next is Toada, which is another piece, was written for cello and piano. But Francisco Braga is a very important composer. That was the start for my collaboration with piano, actually, with a Brazilian pianist.
Wonderful. So we have not mentioned, but Darren, soon after graduating from Curtis, he actually auditioned to the São Paulo State Symphony in New York City and was hired as solo bass trombonist. And he has been here in São Paulo for over 20 years. Is that correct, Darren?
22 years and going.
22 years. And when you came here, eventually you met your wife, Svetlana, who was a violinist from Russia. And they have two beautiful children whom I've had the pleasure of meeting. And Darren has been really a musical force and in Brazil, someone who not only is a great performer, but also is very much involved in defending the classical music in Brazil, in the importance of classical music. So thank you so much, Darren, for being in that role, for being such an important voice out there for classical music in Brazil. All right. Let's hear from Francisco Braga, Toada, for trombone and piano, performed by Darren Millen. was a delightful selection, Darren. Thank you so much for bringing that to our show. Debbie, you have been, of course, very busy as a principal trombonist, but you always had a role as a teacher, and you have been one of the most important teachers in the New Mexico's Philharmonic EMI project, which is the Young Musicians Initiative. And we know that you do that very passionately. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about this wonderful educational project from the New Mexico Philharmonic?
Yes, I would love to. I've been in the program for over 7 years, almost since its inception. And the program it's a terrific way for students to learn the instruments of the orchestra, to learn choir. They do solfege. It's 4 days a week and free to the students. All of the students go to Title I schools, and they're age pretty much from 4 to 14 is the age range we work with. It's been a terrific program for me, and it's suited me very well. I feel like we help people mature and grow up emotionally, socially, become better members of their community. And I think the students would agree that it makes them feel more confident and more capable while they're learning an instrument. Especially now during the pandemic, I think it's very important. I would say there are 3 aspects to the program of what we're providing. Number 1 is stability. Number 2 is community. And those 2 pillars that we rest on are very important during the pandemic. So we are continuing to teach online this fall. And the third part of the program is social and emotional growth through music education. And in the time that I've been there have been so many great stories about students and what they've learned and how they've grown. I think one of my favorite students was one of my toughest in the very early years. And he was in the program for 4 years. At the beginning of the program, he would be the one that would get off track and fool around in class and be the behavior problem as quickly as he could. He was one of those boys, a second grader, learning the trombone. And through so much energy and focus on him and on teaching him, by the end of 5th grade, he had changed so dramatically. He'd really learned to face failure and keep going. He had some disabilities of some type. He had a very difficult time reading music early on, but he became much more confident over the time there. And now these days...
That's really wonderful.
So he was sort of my greatest success story. I think he went off to middle school a changed person. And recently, we teach online now, and it's a very different program because the students go to school online all day, and then they come to Young Musician Initiative at the end of the day. The attendance has been very high because the students, I think, feel the stability in the community. And I have to be very open about behavior. So last week I was teaching one of my students. It was a wind ensemble rehearsal, and one of the students was skateboarding through about 10 minutes of class. But he needed that, so I say, okay, just turn your camera off, and when you're finished skateboarding, come back, things like that. So it's very flexible now, but students keep coming back every day. And I'm really, really excited to be teaching this fall at Young Musician Initiative.
I would say there are only very few things in life that can be as rewarding as working with young children and teaching them whatever, but music is something that can really transform lives. And I had the privilege of visiting some of the EMI classes and rehearsals with my friend, Steve Baca, who was also a teacher at EMI, another trombonist. And I was really touched to see the enthusiasm and just the joy in these kids' faces, in their eyes. And certainly it's something that we love doing, and I really want to thank you for dedicating so much of your time and your passion to these kids from EMI. So I understand we have a video from one of the EMI presentations. this video that we're going to watch now, Debbie?
We will be watching the Wind Ensemble from last December's concert, and they'll be playing Jingle Bells.
Wonderful. Let's watch it.
Thank you.